Great.
Okay, good evening, dear professors and dear students. Today we have as our guest Jake Michael Singer, a multi-talent and multidisciplinary artist from South Africa who has exhibited many times also in Turkey. And I first want to ask at the beginning of his presentation a question. Jake, can you tell us about your work and
Sure.
how it's evolved so that the people get to know you better?
Sure. So welcome everyone. I'm Jake, and it's my pleasure to be here in Istanbul talking to you. And I hope I can share something of beauty and importance, not only about my work, not only about art, design, and creation, but also about how we bring ourselves into this material world. So firstly, this is a sentence by William Kentridge, which is put making before thinking. And so I'm going to tell you about the making before I tell you about the thinking. And this, I think, is very important in the art making process or in any making process, especially art, because sometimes if you try to come up with a good idea in isolation, it doesn't quite come out. So first, I'm going to be talking about my sculptures from 2013 to 2018. This is a sculpture called Construction Stasis, a proposal for dystopia. And this was exhibited at my graduate exhibition, and it's aggregate gravel that's cast with water in a blast freezer. And then they're suspended, so the volume decays slowly over time, and the stones fall and create sounds on steel platforms. I think this kind of action, this kind of use of material, making the material come alive, is something that is very important to me, and I think it might be for me what defines good work. And so now I'm going to go quickly through my work, because there's some other interesting ideas I'd like to talk about. These were made in about 2015. This one is called Organ Fulcrum, and this one is called Bright Lattices of Logic. It was a very experimental phase of mine, which again, I think these kind of experimental phases underpin what came later. So they're made out of burnt plastic, glass, silicone, steel, concrete, and brick. This one's made out of plastic, woven plastic, and held together by pins and steel. These are the escalation incidents, which are another kind of more well-known body of work of mine. They're laser cut pieces of steel, and it's kind of interesting how although there is no figure in it, the scale and the architecture imply the figure. So this work came first, and then in 2016 I was commissioned to build this work, which is 6 meters high, at the Work in Art building. Here's another image of it. Here I took a staircase from a building that was being destroyed, and I recomposited it into this, which I call a catastrophe on the skyline of Johannesburg. This one's called Concrete Sequence. These are 4 large slabs of concrete, about 2 meters long, 1 meter wide. They vary in dimension, and the highest one is 4 meters up. And this is at Nyrox Foundation. The idea was to cast the concrete onto the tree, and to see which one survived, the tree or the concrete, maybe as a metaphor for our urban environment or our relationship to nature. I also somehow like this idea that if a plant grew through a building, somehow maybe the building would come up with it. So now I'm going to take you through some photographs of mine. I used to create installations which I would photograph, and because I guess it was just taking photographs of it was the best way to kind of capture it. A lot of my, I think, work starts from abstraction, and I've always tried to avoid the figure. And then somehow the figure just comes, mainly for scale. So this one's called Tourism. It's an exquisite corpse, and there's 3 people over here. This one is called the first Baptism, the first rectangle. And here I'm using, again, a lot of plastic textiles. There's little drawings in there. There's other little sculptures that I've made. Here's my friend's hand. And all of these photographs, they're not digitally composited. So it's literally just a set and then a camera and click, and then just color balancing. So I like these negative spaces, and I like it when there's a lot of detail in a work that you can just keep on looking and looking and looking. These ones are called Genesis. I worked with dancers from Johannesburg to make these. And again, no Photoshop, just a lot of kind of set design. These I worked with dancers again. These are shot on the top of a rooftop in Johannesburg. Johannesburg's quite a chaotic city. And I thought in some kind of way, these embodied maybe a dystopic or futurist theme for Johannesburg. And here there's an inversion between the set, which looks unreal, and the figure, which is in a chroma key. So usually in photography, you have a chroma key backdrop onto which you put a figure, and then you digitally modify the figure. But again, these are just sets that I've created, and quite dangerous. They were quite dangerous, and they were made over, there was a series of 4 that was made over 3 or 4 days. These were the last photographs that I took in 2018 after the Kampala Biennale, where I assisted Ida Muline. And so now these wheels in the set are digitally composited, although I've photographed each one individually. And here you can see little wings, which were at the same time that I was busy making the Murmuration series, which I'll show you just now. These are some paintings. This one is oil. It's called We Will Meet Again in the Field. It's oil, and it's 220 centimeters high. And this one, I think, was in 2017, and it's about 50 centimeters big. It's actually a drawing made from spray paint and ink. And it's kind of interesting to me to see how long it took to develop this body of work, to develop these ideas. And then it's interesting how the foundations for something small came to something larger much later. And they're all variations on a similar idea, which is repetition, hope, despair. And this work on the left here kind of makes me think of a typical landscape in South Africa, just with openness, kind of heavenly portrayal, and freedom. And another thing in these works, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to kind of work gesturally with the paintbrush, and so the image emerges out. And this theme of emergence is quite important to me, as you'll see in my I guess, more recent sculptures. This one we showed in the Küçük Mustafa Pasha Hammam last year, which is an exhibition that Sinan also curated. So this is a sculpture which I made in 2015, and it was one of the more experimental works, and it's maybe a precedent for the Murmuration series. Yeah, and again, the way that ideas develop over time is something quite special. And I'll be talking more about ideas and how they evolve and how they come to us a little bit later. So these are the Murmurations. This one over here is called Dawn Chorus. It's 2.7 meters high. This is one of my first major works, which I first showed at Narox Foundation in 2019. This one is All the Birds Flew with a Harsh Scream, and this was shown at the South African National Gallery. This is the same sculpture, Marmara. It's 4 meters high. And this is in the studio, and this is at Norval Foundation. And so to tell you a little bit about the Murmurations, I'm welding together thousands of pieces of steel together to come to form a kind of Baroque harmony. And there's a paradox. I see a paradox between freedom and incarceration, because the reason why these wires are produced is for the purpose of fencing. So I'm depicting a bird, but I'm using the material of fences. Another important thing is the idea of emergence. So a murmuration, the term murmuration, refers to when birds flock together and create patterns together in the sky. And this kind of behavior can be seen in schools of fish, neural networks, people running in crowds, and also clusters of stars. This is also the Murmurations at the Küçük Mustafa Pasha Hammam, which we showed last year. These were the two main installations. And this work over here was spinning because it was suspended from so high. So it was just sort of spinning as a choreographer for the rest of these smaller works. Okay, so this is called 10,000 Things. It's a work which I've been developing for 2 years. It's made from human hair, platinum cure silicone, which is the silicone that they use on film sets to mimic flesh. It's made from steel and LED light. One of the things I want from almost digital art or digital media is for it to have a physical presence. I think this is something I'm almost wanting from digital art itself. And another thing about this work is that it tracks with the moon. So the color and the rhythm change according to which phase of the moon. Another kind of broader principle that I have for making comes from Taoism, which Lao Tzu says 1 gives birth to 2, 2 gives birth to 3, and 3 gives birth to the myriad things, all under heaven. And so I've taken this kind of idea and thinking about the moon as a symbol for the cosmos, and then the cosmos giving birth to Earth, on which the sculpture sits. The Earth gives birth to plants, which is the form in which it's in. Plants give birth to humans, which is the flesh and the hair, and humans give birth to technology. So in this way, I'm sort of contemplating how we should see technology as a natural evolution of not only nature and earth, but of the cosmos. And here's the same sculpture in my studio in Johannesburg, and you can see it in the light. And we've installed the sculpture at the Yedikule Hizaro during the Istanbul Biennale, and we're showing it until I think the end of November. And Sinan also helped curate this exhibition. Cool. So that's the end of my my artworks. Now we're going to talk about some more interesting things.
So Jake, should you start, or should I start the clip, or after this?
Sorry, Sinan, I didn't get you there.
Should I start the clip now or after this slide?
Oh, after this.
Okay.
So I'm going to now be talking about genealogy and theory and subjectivity and objectivity and science and materialism. So again, Lao Tzu says, the Tao that cannot be told is not the eternal Tao. The name that cannot be named is not the eternal name. The nameless is the origin of heaven and earth. The named is the mother of all things. So for me as an artist, this kind of resonates as to how, even in looking for ways to understand things, we're always putting labels on it, and it's never exactly what that thing is, or it's always a little, there's a kind of a poverty around it. And I think the real richness or the real purchase of making is in genealogy. So looking at how different forms, different ideas evolve throughout time. And I'm going to be showing you a bit more about that. So this, we're going to play you a clip, and it's going to underpin an idea I have about subjectivity. So Sinan, could you please play the clip? It's from The Big Lebowski by the Coen brothers. Sinan, I'm not seeing anything.
Okay, just a moment, please. Are you seeing it now?
No.
I will try again. Just a moment, please.
Cool.
Because on my screen seems to be shared.
Maybe you can just play the clip, Sinan Hocam, without full screen.
Okay. Can you hear it and see it?
No. Yes, it's working now.
Now it's okay. Yes.
camino del desierto, el viento me despeina, su aroma de colita, nada del aire. Ella estaba a la entrada y la campana de sonar, y me dijo ya mismo, esto puedo del cielo. Ella encendeu una vela y nuestra del camino, soy moza el corredor y yo te dije diciendo, nuestra música del California.
Fucking Santana. That creep can roll, man.
Yeah, but he's a pervert, dude.
Yeah.
No, he's a sex offender with a record. He did 6 months in Chino for exposing himself to an 8-year-old.
Huh.
When he moved to Hollywood, he had to go door to door to tell everyone he was a pederast.
What's a pederast, woman?
Shut the fuck up, Donnie. Have it your way, but my
Your
point
role.
is, my point is,
Are you ready to be fucked, man? I see you roll your way into the semis. Dios mío, man. Liam and me, we're gonna fuck you up.
Yeah. Well, you know, that's just like your opinion, man.
Let me tell you something, Pandeo. You pull any of your crazy shit with us, you flash a piece out on the lanes, I'll take it away from you and stick it up your ass and pull the fucking trigger till it goes click.
Jesus.
You said it, man. Nobody fucks with the Jesus.
eight-year-olds, dude.
Thanks, man. So, is my screen sharing? Yes. So the importance of me showing that clip is I really enjoy how the dude who's kind of like a washed up guy, but a sort of source of wisdom throughout the movie. I just liked that he just says, that's your opinion, man. And when we're judging art and looking at the world, everybody's just got an opinion, right? Everyone's just got an opinion. And those opinions are always formed by what is their experience, where they're coming from. And sometimes we need to take someone's opinion, even of ourselves or of our work. We need to see that opinion as from where they're coming from. So for example, when I'm making paintings, if I ask one of my friends who paints figuratively and I say, should I put figures in it? He'll say, yeah, put figures in it. And if I ask a friend who paints abstractly, he'll say, you should go more abstractly. And so it's important to know when, where that person's coming from and to take their kind of, to understand where they're coming from. So this is Hume. Hold on, let me just full screen it. So this is what Hume has to say about the 5 qualities of a good critic, which is strong sense, united to delicate sentiment, improved by practice, perfected by comparison, and cleared of all prejudice. So I think in this way, this might give us a framework for understanding what ideas are valid and what are not. And sometimes, like, if you look at a painting and you say, oh, I don't like red, I mean, that doesn't mean that red's a bad color. It just means that you don't like red. And I really believe that there's a difference between someone's taste and whether it's a good work. And how we think about that is, how does it fit into its genre? How does it fit into its genealogy? So, for example, with the example of Tool, maybe you don't like heavy metal music, but Tool are are brilliant musicians, not only in their genre, but absolutely brilliant on the same level as Mozart. And if you say, oh, I don't like classical music, doesn't mean Mozart is bad. So So here, I really like mandalas, and they demonstrate to us the way that things permutate. So there's like a center, an idea that then translates across time and mutates and comes to like make good art or something like that. So here we can see that the roots of the word genealogy, genre, and genius are all connected to the Proto-Indian word gen, which is to produce, to beget, to give birth. And as I was saying, like, one of the most important things about being human, I'd say it's the important thing about our human condition, is that we're able to translate ideas, to give ideas, to communicate ideas. And ideas are objects of the mind. Specifically in like Dzogchen meditation, in this Buddhist practice, they would agree with this, that it's an object of the mind. And humans give each other these objects, and rocks can't, for example. So last week we went to go see the archaeology museum with Sinan and some of the students. And what struck me is the sarcophagus of Alexander the Great. And is it an artwork? So it's an object now that embodies a whole bunch of complexities of what it means to be Alexander the Great and what it means to live in that time. And when we look at the tomb, we can understand so much about life, death, war in that time, maybe ambition, even, yeah, aesthetics. And here's a beautiful little detail of the sarcophagus. And over here is a lion, which was quite interesting to me because I never really thought of lions in Europe or lions in the northern region of the world. So now I'd like to talk about art with a small a, and then art with a big A, and then design. There's a theorist called Collingwood who in the 1950s came out with these distinctions between art and design. And design required the use of actions to achieve a well-defined end, while in the arts, there is no clearly defined end. And for me, I agree with this in a way, but I also don't agree with it. And the reason is because there's a sort of improvisation around maybe about what a designer could do, and then also it's almost irrelevant. I can make the case for no distinction between art and design, and that case is basically that it's just people creating things within genres. And when we look at this art with a capital A, it's me saying, like, what should be in museums? What does the society decide to preserve? And this idea really changed in the 20th century when now just if you're a painter, you're an artiste, and I don't really see this as something that's correct. Like, for example, I would say my favorite artist was Gaudi. And of course he was an architect, he was a designer. And that's very different to, like, now if you're just making painting, now you're an artist. And again, it comes down to genealogy, how when an artist or designer produces an object, where in its genealogy does it exist? And so, for example, like an Eames chair or even a MacBook those should belong in museums more than just some random badly painted artwork. Yeah. So I hope that's kind of clear. And I think in the modern period, particularly like if you think about Van Gogh, this kind of like lone tormented genius expressing himself, that doesn't have much purchase. And for example, like Picasso, we think of him as a genius, but he really stole a lot, or was influenced by African art, traditional African art. So there he's just working in the genealogy of African art. And then he kind of becomes a central node, a figure that everyone it's just a name, like what Lao Tzu was saying, it's just a name that people are using to describe a kind of phenomena, which itself is just trying to describe the world. So here's another genealogy. We think of, like, if you type in geodesic dome, everyone says, oh, Buckminster Fuller created the first geodesic dome. And then we can see lineages of Olafur Eliasson, who is a contemporary sculptor, and Thomas Saraceno, who is a contemporary sculptor. And here they're translating the same ideas across time, many years later. But in actual fact, Buckminster Fuller wasn't the first person who made the geodesic dome, but we're just using the term Buckminster Fuller to describe a certain aesthetic lineage of which he's an important node. But actually, Walter Bauersfeld made a geodesic dome for a planetarium in 1922, 30 years later. So really, it's about the lineage. It's about how an idea carries across time. And here there's the Pantheon, right, which was also a dome, which was made, thousands of years before. And here's again mandala, which who knows how long humans have been using this motif to describe the world. So this is some examples of African contemporary art, particularly African figurative work. So over here, we've got Yinka Shonabare, who's, I think, in his 60s now. He's a real kind of pioneer of African art. And you can see how he influences Kehinde Wiley, an American who's probably about 40. And then Kehinde Wiley influences Wanda Bushle, who's a South African artist, who is one of my contemporaries. And you can see how certain styles and languages are being moved across time to describe certain ideas about what it means to be African in the world. And even, for example, the whole thing about Yinka Shonabare is that these textiles that he's using were like these wax textiles that were sold by the Dutch to Africans. So even that textile, that aesthetic, that way that we identify what is African fashion is not African fashion. And I'm not saying that these ways of identifying each phenomena are not important, but it's just so interesting to look at the genre as a whole, the genealogy, the permutation of ideas. And so here's Kerry James Marshall, another very well-known, preeminent American artist, painter. And you can see how he's, this is Simpiwe Nzube and Inga Samson, who are both South African artists. And here you can see how Simpiwe is, I guess, influenced by the way that Kerry James Marshall deals with the landscape and backgrounds and composition. And Inga Samson is, you can see how this idea about treating the black skin is also moving to Inga Samson and also to Wanda Bushle. And it's not like, again, nobody's stealing, but the kind of brilliance of what they're doing is taking these ideas, taking these words, these forms, and translating them into contexts that mean something else and mean something for themselves. Yeah, and then I guess the real question around what is genius is how important, or yeah, how important is that translation? How does that translation really capture the imaginations of people? And then the second part is that there's also a context that is required for that to exist. And what I mean by that is that if you're a painter in, let's just say, Zimbabwe, it's very hard to connect with audiences. So versus if you're a painter in America, there's a huge audience and appetite for contemporary art. So now, instead of maybe ascribing a certain aesthetic, I guess the Buckminster Fuller example is perfect because he's American and Walter Bauersfeld is German, and America kind of has more cultural influence. So again, it's not judging what these are, but it's just looking at these kind of lineages and how ideas translate and permutate, and how I think the case for originality is a farce. It's really something that I think we've been let down to believe, that you have to be some kind of genius. No, it's just making. It's just making. And even in pre-modern times, Renaissance kind of studios, you know, there'd be a genius, a genie, a spirit that occupies the studio. There'd be a master of the studio, and many people kind of like drinking from the cup of that that studio, that spirit, that set of ideas. And so indeed, Kerry James Marshall in a letter to a young artist says, attend to the function of your work, its performance within a certain genre, instead of its meaning. It's not the subject matter per se, but it's the treatment that matters. And then another interesting thing he wrote in the same letter was what Barthes calls studium, Roland Barthes calls studium. Studium is basically a category of unremarkable objects and images. And I think when we're using the capital A for art, we're really just talking about that which should be preserved because it's meaningful for us, right? And I guess in the contemporary understanding of art as a genius expression of a tormented individual, Alexander the Great's sarcophagus wouldn't fit into that, yet it's worth preserving. So I think this is a distinction that needs to be made and thought about. Okay, and now we're going to get a little bit more technical. This is an explanation of everything by Steve Reinker, who's a professor at Northwestern University. So Sinan, could you please play this video?
Sure, Jake.
First category is whatever might be imagined. And that includes, you know, the set of whatever we might imagine. Category 2 is a subset of whatever might be imagined, and that's whatever may exist. Okay, so we can like chart that out. If this is whatever might be imagined, within that, as a subset, is whatever may exist. Okay, third category is that which exists. And that in itself is a subset of whatever may exist. Then we have, as our fourth category of things in the world, that which we have imagined. And that isn't a subset of category 3, at least not purely, because what we have imagined may or may not actually exist at this time. So that actually goes. Okay, but here's where things get interesting in how these categories relate. The between whatever might be imagined and whatever may exist, that's God. And between that which exists and that which we have imagined, that is science. There's also a line here, and at the top half is the realm of the virtual, and the bottom two are the realm of the actual. So you can see that God and science are just kind of the virtual, actual inverse of the same thing. Okay, between whatever might be imagined and that which exists, that's the realm of invention. Between whatever may exist and that which we have imagined, that, of course, is the humanities. The diagonal ones are more interesting. Between whatever might be imagined and that which we have imagined, and these arrows go both ways, that's art. And between whatever may exist and that which exists, that is design or engineering. They're the same thing. We could also, if we wanted, make a counterclockwise circuit from that which we have imagined around to whatever may exist, to whatever might be imagined, to that which exists, and back to that which we have imagined. And that circuit is magic.
Cool. Thanks, Sinan. Cool. So what I love about this diagram is that it explains literally everything. And I really see my role as a sculptor, as an artist, as someone making three-dimensional things, is traversing this whole movement from that which we have imagined to that which we exists, using humanities, using science, using invention. Yeah, and design and engineering. And I think, I mean, it really, can you think about anything that exists outside of it, this graph, this diagram? And you probably can't, because it just encapsulates everything. And it all fits everything together. And I wouldn't say that it's flawless, but at least it's a model for maybe thinking about how things intersect, and how we create tools for understanding the world. So now I'd like to talk about science. I see science as not different to art. So, for example, putting aside the utility of science, so like medicine, think about how many people, how many organizations, funding, technology has come together to produce just this image, right? Which is an image from the James Webb telescope. I don't know if you're familiar with it, and it's of the Southern Nebula Ring. Super high-res image of it, and now suddenly we can have a whole new understanding, I question, but we can have an understanding of what this phenomena very far away is. But at the same time, it's an image. is it anything we didn't know? And what does it tell us about our lives as human beings, right? And so in a way, this is also art. And when Elon Musk, for example, I've heard Elon Musk describe his interest or impetus for going to Mars as an image of green against red, again, another image. And we can keep on inventing and saving human lives and working in science. I'm not deriding it in any way, but what's the point, right? At what point are we able to kind of make sense of ourselves living in this world? And how do all these tools come together to help us understand ourselves? And so, again, I see this image as art, not science. It is science, but it's also art. So just before this slide, another tool which I think about a lot is mathematics, which obviously came out of, I guess, the Middle East and Persia, which you all are very connected to here. But it's not something that's really thought about that much in the West. And then we talk about ideas like appropriation. Well, the whole world has appropriated Persian culture, right, which is mathematics, and even ancient Indian culture. And again, they're just tools for understanding the world and making sense of this mystery of being alive. And so now we need to question, how does you as a person being here with feelings and emotions come to the world of material objects, color, form, phenomena, and how small is even the spectrum with which we're able to see is less in the light spectrum, is less than whatever, 5%, maybe it's 2%. So how limited are we in even our capability of trying to keep labeling things, keep pointing at things, isolating phenomena, describing it, and does it get us anywhere? Like, for example, we just keep looking up and up and up towards the macrocosm, the universe, and the mysteries just are infinite. And then we look smaller in the microcosm, and they keep getting smaller and smaller and smaller. And is there ever going to be a point where it's like, okay, that's the end, and that's the end, and there's nothing more, and now we understand everything? So I really think, especially in the Dzogchen tradition of meditation, is looking inside of yourself, because you are literally the universe that is born to self-reflect. I mean, you're like pieces of that southern nebula that's thinking about yourself and having fears and desires and worries. It's quite beautiful. Yeah. And then lastly, if you think about all throughout time, all that's been done, all the war, all the famine, all the migrations that's occurred in order for us to just be sitting here talking about what it means to be alive and what art means. It's quite an incredible thing, and there's no war outside. So again, there are conditions and genealogies and circumstances that allow innovation, art, science, and all kinds of practice to arrive, to exist. And this we should be grateful for. Yeah, and then lastly, I'd like to finish with this quote by Johann Wolfgang von Goethe. Until one is committed, there's always hesitancy, the chance to draw back, always ineffectiveness. Concerning all acts of initiative and creation, there is one elementary truth, the ignorance of which kills countless ideas and splendid plans, that the moment one definitely commits oneself, then providence moves too. All sorts of things occur to help one that would never otherwise have occurred. A whole stream of events issue from the decision, raising to one's favor all manner of unforeseen incidents and meetings and material assistance, which no one could have ever dreamed would come her way. Whatever you can do or dream, you can begin it. Boldness has genius, power, and magic in it. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Jake. Dear professors, dear students, if you have questions, please don't hesitate to ask Jake. Yes, Bert?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I would like to go back to one of the slides, attend to the function of your work. In which way would you say that your specific work, Jake, would have an overlap with the function of architecture?
Good question. I think in you mean this by Kerry James Marshall?
Yeah.
I mean, so attend to the function of your work. I think there he's referring to how that work functions in proximity to power and in proximity to, with respect to the world, not necessarily like functional. Yeah, but that's also an interesting question because I think architecture is about placemaking, and art and aesthetics, and certainly like maximalism, not minimalism, does create a sense of place. Like, for example, in Florence, if you consider how much detail has been put everywhere, even in Istanbul, if you consider like even all the ornamentation on the royal gates, I think there are aesthetics and definitely genealogies that give Istanbul a sense of place, a sense of community, a sense of identity, and even a sense of transcendence. I find it a very magical city because of this. Thanks, Bert.
Salih Hocam? So your hand raised.
Actually, I waited for others maybe to start with the questions. Then thanks, Bert. Thanks, first of all, for this great presentation. And you inspired me a lot with your work.
Thank you.
It was so nice to hear and to listen to you. And you talk about the translation and transformation of forms, actually kind of a reinterpretation of forms, like the work of Buckminster Fuller and how it transformed in the past and in the future. And in one of your recent works, in this 2022 work, you mentioned nature giving birth to the humans, then humans giving birth to technology. What's your interpretation for the next step? Is it something, let's say, circular? Technology gives birth to something else and we start over, or where does it lead? What's your opinion about that?
Thanks. That's an interesting question. So, I mean, I think it's kind of like a mandala. You know, there's just more and more and more and more permutations and translations of something that started out very different. And then also, I mean, what's kind of interesting, even if you look at the structure of a tree, in this kind of like probability diagram, if we do fail as humans to invent the next technology that will help us save ourselves, let's just say, then there will be another form of nature that is maybe more successful. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, yes, surely. Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Thanks.
So any question, folks? Or any comments? Should we encourage you, or should we wait a bit? Okay. Salih Hocam, I see no one raising hands.
Yeah, I saw the open microphone, so I was hesitated, but I think that microphone is off again. I'm sure there is a lot to learn from this presentation. It will be available on our YouTube channel in the future. We will also share the link to that. I think more people will benefit from it, from this very inspiring presentation.
Cool. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, if there are no more questions, we can proceed to the end. Ezgi. Ezgi raised hand. Okay. Yes,
I
please.
just wanted to say thank you because it was a really horizon widening conversation with you. I'm an industrial design student, but I really enjoyed all of it. So thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Jake, for your stimulating presentation.
Thank you. Thank you.
Great having you here. But now we have a little tradition here in ArchiDesign Talks.
Okay.
Bahçeşehir University Faculty of Architecture and Design, we donate in our guest's name. So a donation has been made in your name to SAY Foundation, helping underprivileged children for the equality in education.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for all your time and effort.
Thank you. It's really my honor to talk to all of you, and thank you, Sinan, for organizing this. It's really my honor, and thanks to the university for making the donation. It's very kind.
Salih Hocam.
Again, thank you. And I think we can thank everyone for being here at the first episode of the new season of ArchiDesign Talks. It was a great start, I guess. And we hope to see you again, Jake, anytime. Cool. And I'm looking forward to be in your installations in Istanbul.
Yes, me too.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Good evening. Good evening, everyone. Thanks.
There is one more raised hand, as I see.
I think that was for saying bye.
Okay. Cheers, everyone. Thank you.
Cheers.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Thanks.